You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 6, Kobayashi.
Welcome to another episode of Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Ashley V. Robinson.
And I'm Norman Lau. Welcome back. We're back. How excited are you? I'm pretty excited.
Back. We haven't been texting all week about this. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, not at all. No. We haven't been pretty much texting throughout the course of this entire break of when are we going to get back to the mic, like right now. And here we are.
Sorry, had to leave the country, but now we're back doing more Trek stuff because I was like if you imagine Murph, but covered in salt and shriveling and dying. That was me not being here.
Just like on the Andoria 4 program. But we're going to get to that in a second. So just like our Mission Log flagship podcasts, each week here on Mission Log Prodigy, we discuss every episode of this animated series, discover what makes each of them special and how special they are, and see if there are any morals or meanings or messages that we have learned. And I am capital thrilled to be back with you, Ashley. How are you?
I am pretty good. I'm so excited to be talking about this episode. I think a lot of our messages about it were all in caps with many exclamation points and no real context for fear of spoilers or of saying the same thing that we're going to say here today. So I know that there's going to be a lot of leaning back and yelling, at least on my behalf.
I'm just glad that we're back in each other's presence again. When Ashley was gone, we had the opportunity just as Mission Log Prodigy as a podcast to be able to have Nami Melamud and the Hageman brothers here for their special supplementary interviews, of which, if you listen to the Hageman brothers interviews, they were talking about this episode 106 in kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of way where they couldn't really spill the beans, but they weren't lying about how in tears we would be during the course of this episode. So, yeah.
I have to say, because I first came to Mission Log just as a listener, so even though I'm really sad that I couldn't be here for those interviews, it was kind of fun to be back just listening and enjoying them as a fan. So thank you for carrying the torch and doing all the heavy lifting while I left the country.
Oh, you're welcome. But let's talk about this week, because this is a big episode. I mean, we're back after, 5 weeks of break? I think at least it felt like 5 weeks of break.
It felt like 100 years, such a long
It
break.
literally felt like the distance of time between when Riker said fire at the end of season 3 of The Next Generation to the very beginning of season 4, right? It was like, it's that cliffhangery of a break. But we're back and we're excited. We're going to talk about this week's episode. So what do you have for us, Ashley?
Okay, so this week we are on episode 6. No, that's 6. Kobayashi, which I spelled wrong in every single one of my notes. Please remember that Mission Log Prodigy is an in-depth review podcast. So if you have not seen Kobayashi yet, you may want to put us on pause. We'll wait. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
I'm so
It was
glad that
amazing.
you watched the episode.
Did you love it?
Wasn't
it? Yes, it was great. Amazing.
And then, since you're back, we're going to talk about it.
And so just please remember that this show is produced for the YouTube channel, which is what you're watching right now, and also an audio podcast, which you can find on podcast.roddenberry.com. So if you're watching us here on YouTube, make sure that you hit the like button and share and subscribe so that we can share all this out with all of our new fans and get more of that algorithm working for us so we can grow this fan base. You can also find us on all of your podcast catchers of choice, like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and of course, podcast.roddenberry.com. And we're growing our channel on Twitter by leaps and bounds every week. So please follow us there at ML_Prodigy. Keep up with all the latest news and updates.
Also, I really love our Twitters. So please, if you don't believe Norman, please follow us on Twitter. It's really fun. But before we jump into this recap, here is why this podcast is so unique. We want to hear from you, but especially you, the younger Prodigy fans, because we're old farts here. So we want you to share your thoughts with us on the show. So please send us a 1 to 2 minute voice message at missionlog-prodigy at roddenberry.com. That's missionlog-prodigy at roddenberry.com. In your message, please answer the following questions. What is your first name and your age? Did you like the episode? What was your favorite part of the episode? And what did you learn? And we look forward to hearing your comments, which will be featured at the end of our show, at the end of this show. And just to start things off here, we'll answer the exact same questions, and then you kind of know what you have to do. So, Norman, big question, important question. Did you like the episode?
I mean, I really did. I liked the episode for the intent of what this episode meant. This goes into morals and meanings and messages. There were a couple of technical things in this episode that I wish were probably a little bit, I guess, more polished, but I'm not sure if that was a stylistic choice or a difficulty of producing a show like this with the resources that were available to them, limited or not, in the pandemic. So I don't know if some of the execution of, say, some of the voice acting or voice lifting that they did for some of the cameo characters was up to their specific standards. I can't really say, but that's just something that was a little bit on, that would be in the minus column for me on this episode, but there are so many other pluses in the plus column for this episode. How about you, Ashley?
Nice. The second I saw the title, I knew I was going to love it because one, Kobayashi Maru, if you're familiar with it, is like a tried and true trope that we have seen across a bunch of Star Treks. It's always really fun and it's always deeply revealing about the character who's going through it. It's a great B plot, which we saw here to complement like an interior struggle and overcoming obstacles in the A plot. And also because it's so closely tied to Spock, and Spock is my favorite character. I was so excited. More on Pin, more on Spock later. But yeah, I loved it from the second the title card came up. I really liked the episode.
Yeah.
Next question. What was your favorite part?
Probably Chakotay's reveal at the end.
We're going right to the end.
Yeah. Well, I liked that it was part of kind of like this weird broken data stream of kind of like hodgepodge data that was getting filtered through inside the bridge. And here's the great thing about, I think, some of the smaller detail choices. Have you noticed that Rock Talk has been the one so far that has pushed the button literally to re-engage like the Voyager feels for this show? She did the first time when she hit the Delta. Then you heard Nami's music kind of like fire up the Voyager feels in the music bars. And then she's the one who also touches the Chakotay data stream and starts the Chakotay entrance into the show with Chakotay and Janeway back together again, albeit in different positions. So I kind of dug that. Yeah.
I hadn't noticed that, but what I like about that is it's kind of subtly telling us that she's the heart of the show. She's also literally a big, powerful red muscle, which is what your heart is. And if she's triggering all of these beats, I really like that for her.
You're working on so many different levels right now. Spock!
That's my favorite part, Spock! Oh, my little Vulcan. Vulcans are my favorite thing about Star Trek. I was so happy. He looks so good. Spock.
Did you have to take a breath? I mean, did you have to like sit back and kind of take a breath and be like, I can't believe
I literally screamed. Like when I tell you, like I literally screamed. I was like, oh my God. Yes. I fan with the property that's been done for this long and in so many different iterations. Punch my microphone. I'm so excited.
She's so excited.
It's tough how to use fan service and it's tough how to execute Easter eggs. And I think this episode, kind of like what we see on Lower Decks, was a really intelligent use of some cameos, but we'll get to that. Okay, and then my final question for phase one is, what did you learn from the Kobayashi episode?
Well, the Kobayashi Maru test, it's, if you're a longtime Star Trek fan, it's about character, it's about leadership, it's about making decisions and what the decisions do to you, how you handle that. And it's about putting the team first, putting your feelings aside, putting your wants and desires aside, because ultimately you're the captain and you have to bring your crew home. That's the Kobayashi Maru, right? So that's kind of writes itself, don't you think?
I mean, it pretty much tells you the same thing that most Kobayashi Maru stories do, that there's no such thing as a no-win scenario, right? No matter how complicated things are, if you unite and work together and you're strong, Murph will do something adorable, and slowly but surely we will grow closer and we will overcome all of our obstacles. Kind of like how Norman and I grow closer every time I make a mistake on the show.
Oh, every time. Every time. And
constantly. The editing that goes into the show, you have no idea. Actually.
And that brings really Earl closer to both of us as well, right?
and of smacking both of us through the power of the internet.
You know what's interesting thing about the Kobayashi Maru is that it was introduced to us in 1982 in The Wrath of Khan. I mean, that was, that was the very first time the phrase, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one, that was also introduced in that movie. And then it's actually brought to the forefront here in modern Star Trek and in the very first episode of Discovery, which was called the Kobayashi Maru. So I find it really interesting that there's this pattern that's formed where we're kind of like trying to reiterate this is one of the biggest messages and tenets of Star Trek. And I find it fascinating that we're bringing that up in modern Star Trek again.
Interesting. I wonder if that is some really smart brand synergy, or I wonder if that is just the collective consciousness of all the brilliant people working on Star Trek right now, bringing that all to the forefront. I mean, like I said, I love every time we do a Kobayashi Maru story, and I think a lot of fans do. So it is only logical that we would bring it up here.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the Kobayashi Maru, because you have the honor of letting us know what happened in the episode with this week's recap for Kobayashi.
Don't judge me, or do whatever. It's the internet. Star Trek Prodigy Season 1, Episode 6, Kobayashi, was written by, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name, but you wrote a really great episode, Aaron J. Waltke, and directed by Alan Wan. After a month for viewers, but only like 5 seconds passes for the crew of the Protostar, we pick up one space jump later, and the Protostar emerges in a section of space none of the crew recognizes. Hologram Janeway pulls up a real quick sensor reading to reveal that they have landed in the Gamma Quadrant. Dun, dun, dun. Dramatic music. But longtime Star Trek fans know that if you have to be stuck in a foreign quadrant with any of the captains, Janeway is the woman that you want to be there with. Unfortunately, Dal and co. don't understand this, and so very, very reasonable panic ensues. Gwyn, however, is sort of separate from everybody else's panic, struggling internally to see herself as truly a part of the Protostar crew. She still sees herself as the Diviner's daughter, even though the crew and the audience know that she is exactly where she belongs. We get to see flashbacks of how she came into being and a hint at what the Diviner's drive is in having a child in the first place. Fortunately for us, we then get the best fart joke of the season, and there have been many, let me assure you, with Murph doing some exploratory eating and some general exploration of the ship throughout this episode. It's honestly like very adorable. I'm not usually here for fart jokes, and they made it cute. In the meantime, Dal and Jankum Pog are introduced by Janeway to a Trek staple, the holodeck. Wow! So cool. Amazing. What else would a helpful hologram do but run through some simulations and show off just how far VR has come since the novelty of being shown off at CES? The possibilities of what a completely holographic reality can mean culminates in a program called the Kobayashi Maru. And it's set on the deck of the Enterprise D. And Trek fans go wild. Honestly, rendered in more shades than I think there actually were on the set at the time. This is amazing. Dal and Jankum settle onto the bridge, only to be joined by other helpful crew members, including Dr. Beverly Crusher, Constable Odo, Lieutenant Uhura, and Mr. Spock! And when faced with the impossible task of how to save the USS Kobayashi Maru, how could they possibly fail? Spoiler, they fail over and over again. That's the point. But not to be defeated, Dal and Jankum run through the simulation over and over and over and over again in honestly like a very James T. Kirk style of approach to overcoming this particular obstacle. Meanwhile, Gwyn and Zero bond over their sense of disconnection from other people around them. Zero lets us know a little bit more about the collective and the collective living the Medusians share. And we get to see a flashback to 17 years ago. So I guess Gwyn is officially 17 on Tars Lamora, where we learn that Gwyn isn't even the diviner's daughter. She's his clone. And they are the last of their species. So it follows that they would actually have to have clones to reproduce, because you wouldn't be able to have a baby if there was only one of you and you were a species that reproduced in that way. Dahl keeps doing worse and worse at the Kobayashi Maru, and Jenkem is being the opposite of helpful, which is pretty much his gig. So Dahl calls an Arch, banishes him from the holodeck, and replaces him with Scotty. Highly illogical, Captain. Zero and Gwyn talk to Janeway about how the protostar wound up stuck on the prison colony. When Janeway starts to kind of glitch, think into the Spider-Verse. It's a very cool sequence. She quickly realizes her programming has been altered and she no longer has access to all of the information that she ought to as the protostar's hologram. Zero opens up the code and Gwyn is able to translate missing portions of data because they are written in her native language. And isn't it weird that the Federation Universal Translator can't read it? What isn't weird is Dal having a mirror arc to every great captain in the Star Trek canon, and he winds up actually doing really well at the Kobayashi Maru before ultimately failing. And in a supreme action sequence, he and Spock board the Klingon vessel, nerve pinch the crew into submission, and then blow up the Enterprise D. It's super funny, and Dal gets to learn the value of keeping a clear head as he leads, which is a lesson he definitely needed up to this point. He accepts the directive with a lot of grace, and we start to see our little captain grow and bloom before our very eyes. When the data opens up and the crew can see a whole new hologram, a log pops up, and we finally get to see Captain Chakotay and hologram Janeway in their roles reversed, like Norman mentioned earlier, leading the protostar through getting boarded, then blipping out. What does it mean? The end.
I can sit here and watch you read the review and just be entertained to no end. That was fantastic, Ashley. Thank you so much.
French, I can't help it. Thank you. Thank you. I was very nervous because a lot happens in this, but also it's very contained.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, a lot is going on with, I think, like a lot of new relationships that are being forged, like characters that you don't usually see interact with each other. And I think that's a great way to start maybe this conversation, because you have some really interesting points, some observations about that.
Yeah. So for most of these opening episodes, because we're only on episode 6, so we're still very, very early in this season, if you think about animation, you and I have been talking a lot about different character pairings, watching different characters work together. And, you know, it's been documented that the dynamics between Gwyn and Rok-Tahk have been some of our favorites so far. But I've really enjoyed watching Zero and Gwyn bond and interact here as characters who I wouldn't have thought have had that much in common. And Zero obviously has one of the coolest designs, and it's really fun to see their internal character story engine live up to be as cool as the design is.
Yeah. I really liked Zero's kind of taking this role of almost like a Spock McCoy type of counselor. And I'm just using
I was thinking counselor, yeah.
looking at these characters from a different perspective, because as a Medusan, Zero usually uses the telepathic nature of their species to be able to see into the minds or into the souls of these characters. And I think that there's something there, but I just like how Zero's reaching out and using like all of their senses to be able to connect with all of these other people in the crew. I just thought that was really smart. Really, really well done.
What else stood out for you? I know there were lots of things and lots of places that caught your eye.
Well, we could spend an entire other podcast talking about the Easter eggs. I mean, the Kobayashi Maru simulator. I mean, let's face it. Let's take a look at what was really happening. You had 2 characters from the original series, 3 if you actually count Scotty from the motion picture series. You had a character, Odo, from Deep Space Nine. You had Dr. Crusher from TNG. You had them on the bridge of the Enterprise D, but doing the simulation from the screenshot from the Wrath of Khan using the actual like wireframe of the D inside, you know, like just stack the Easter eggs like right up on top of each other. But the one thing though that I did kind of get taken out a little bit of the scene with is the audio quality of the performances, or I would just say performances, that's not fair, from the sound bites that were lifted to fit the narrative. Now, in my headcanon interpretation of what happened, I'm seeing it as the holodeck pulling the actual sound bites from the actual lives of these characters,
like from
their
logs.
history. Yeah, from logs, or how the communicators usually like record everything, even if you take them off the uniform, they record everything.
Well, and characters, especially from the TOS era, are very famous. Dr. Crusher's very famous, so they would have a lot of public appearances too, like on record.
Right. So that's how I'm kind of seeing it. And to be honest with you, I don't think that the newer audience, the younger audience, is going to be watching it and say, oh, I know where that scene's from. Clearly, veteran fans like you and I, and a lot of the older fans out there will know certain lines are coming from certain episodes or movies, because those are very famous, iconic scenes. When Spock said the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, that's from The Wrath of Khan. That's from he was talking to Kirk for the very first time. That scene. But at the same time, though, using it to be able to educate Dal, that's more important. That's more important than just nitpicking that audio level was different than the audio level of the line before. So that's that, really.
I will definitely give them props, though, like the sound mixer, the director, and the writer, for having to you have to write your plot and what you want to have happen, and then you actually someone has to, honestly, probably your writer's assistant, so props to your writer's assistant, has to go and find lines with episode references and timestamps.
Sure.
And you probably, hopefully it's someone who knows Trek, so they probably know the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But there are little, especially with Odo, because Odo, they picked the grumpiest Odo lines that they could have, which I love. I was like, they're just going to have him grunt and he's not going to say nothing else. And rest in peace, Renee Auberginois is going to get credited just for that. But like, somebody had to do a lot of heavy lifting to make it even kind of make sense. And I didn't think it felt like we were bending over backward for the characters that we couldn't get new recordings from. So I was super impressed. And then I thought the way that they used Gates McFadden as Beverly to sort of actually address the action was also very smart.
Yeah, so that was more of like a real-time interaction with a character that was actually reading lines as opposed to like line clips. Yeah. Why are you throwing shade at my boy Chakotay? Come on now.
He's so shady, girl.
Why?
Like he so I've been thinking a lot about it because Chakotay has a really great arc through Voyager. Him and Janeway are really great leaders who complement each other in their oppositions. But Chakotay is ex Maquis.
Yeah.
So what is he getting up to? Why did he delete this? Like to me, the fact that this happened during an attack, it either happened by someone who boarded the ship. So there's like, in my opinion, it's 50-50. It's the diviner who did it in the flashback. And it's like 50-50 Chakotay did it. I think it's more interesting if Chakotay does it. So I'm choosing to say that he's being shady and that's what this is showing us. But also because of the audience, I think we might go a little more streamlined in the storytelling and make it the diviner. But I want it to be Chakotay. So I want this to be him being shady. But tell me why you don't think he's shady.
I just don't know enough. That's
fair.
I think the one thing with the flashback for like the 17 years, because I've been trying to do like all the math, it's like 5 years after Endgame, but it's 17 years in the past. Like, how does Chakotay fit into this? Why is he wearing like a really cool like
how does
V-neck
Spider-Man
uniform?
No Way Home take place in 2025?
Exactly. Like, how do they get blinked? Do they get Thanos snapped from one side to the other? It's just a lot of questions, and I think that just seeing him, it doesn't answer anything. It actually raises like far more interesting questions to see like what's going to be happening. I think the bigger question here is exactly how much can Murph take? Like, he ate a crate of photon grenades, kind of like he blarfed them out. He's okay.
He's Kirby.
Right, exactly.
Like so there's your video game references, children. Yeah. He it's only going to make him more powerful. I think because I haven't figured out what species I think Murph is yet. But I think that everything that Murph has been ingesting and absorbing I think might be stored for later use.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because you don't just drop these little tidbits of him like chewing on things or eating things or finding things to like, slide in and out of and morph through just cuz. The Hagemans and Benny Bond and like all the writers, they're too smart to waste that kind of material, right? So keep your eyes and ears peeled, folks, for what Murph is up to, because he's shenanigans in a very cute blobby form. Right?
Can I talk about something else that I think is shenanigans?
Sure.
And that is the utter lack of Enterprise representation. Like,
I'm so hurt.
I'm gonna die on this hill. When we banished Jankum Pog, it should have been Trip who replaced the engineer position. I know Scotty is the icon, but Trip is lovely. Connor Trinneer is still acting.
Yeah.
And I think as a personality, I think he would have been really funny because he was kind of the hot young buck opposite Dal. So I'm going to die on the hill. Should have had someone from Enterprise. And that was, in my opinion, sort of the most elegant place to put someone.
Just for the representation. I dig it. But yeah, all the series were, right? So yeah. Trip would have been great. He might have said something about, pan-fried catfish or something like that. But, that would have been great.
Look, I know you hate Trip. I know.
I don't know. I love Trip. I don't hate Trip. I love Trip.
I just say that all men hate Trip and all women love him. But also in the Enterprise novelization, so Kobayashi Maru is a ship that Archer couldn't save. And that's why this program is named that. So like that's like B canon. But I just think not having anyone from Enterprise there, I think is like rolling.
I also thought it would have been cool to see like animated Trip, because like animated Spock looked great. Like animated everyone looked great. They all looked great. Beverly's hair, chef's kiss. Right. Even like Odo's like dourness was like way more dour.
The brow was lower than Renee's ever was.
Also, one of the last things I wanted to bring up, the order. Yeah. What is the order? That's a huge question mark. And I mean, obviously we're not going to have an answer here, but that's just something, again, more questions are being raised than are being answered. And that's a big thing, because that was 17 years ago. And the Diviner and Dreadnought are both kind of intimidated by just saying that name. So what does that mean? There's always a bigger fish, right? There's always a bigger fish in the story.
I have a conspiracy theory about the Diviner and Gwyn and why their language was not registered under the Universal Translator. Would you like to hear it?
I would love to hear it.
So we talked earlier about this sort of synergy where like Discovery and Prodigy were doing something similar. I guess this is a Discovery spoiler. I think that whatever the Diviner is and Gwyn is, I think they're from the future. And I think that they have come back. And that's why they know all of these languages. And then the Diviner seems so powerful and has all this technology. And I think that they're stuck. And that's why they're the only ones of their kind and nobody knows their native language.
That's very well possible. I have had discussions with my good friend Charlene, who believes that the Krenim may be involved.
Ooh.
From the fan favorite episode In a Year of Hell. So
I love that.
Yeah. So she thinks that Anorax is up to some shenanigans still. So
wow.
Yeah. So big theories. I'm sure you guys all have theories out there. Just let us know about it. Remember the email, missionlogprodigy at missionlog-prodigy at .prodigy@roddenberry.com. In typical mission log fashion, though, we always kind of like boil things down to a couple of really big observations of morals, meanings, or messages. So was there something or some things, Ashley, that really kind of stood out to you? Just there, I mean, there always are in Prodigy, which makes this part of the conversation amazing. So what are the three M's that stood out to you in this one?
It's way easier to find moral meanings messages in Prodigy than in any of the other shows.
This is true.
And I think that's the type of storytelling. So I think honestly the writers are doing us a huge service by really making it clear what the goal is. So two of mine are serious. One of them is a joke. So we'll start with the two serious ones. Never give up, right? Dal and Gwyn are both learning this lesson in really different but complementary ways. That's how you know it's really good writing, where it's the same but different. They're both facing increasingly more complex problems or programs. One's in the real world, one's not. And they're coming to this very adult realization that there's always going to be more to conquer. There's always going to be more to achieve. And that is a really complicated thing, which kind of leads me into my second point, which is that not even grown-ups know everything. So for the younger viewers, I'm sorry to disabuse you of that. We're seeing this play out super, super literally in terms of Janeway and the deleted data stream and everything that's happening in this flashback, whether or not Chakotay is being shady or not. And it's a tough lesson to learn. And, you know, as an adult, I think that Prodigy is handling this in a really elegant way in terms of the literal representation of it, but also the metaphor of presenting it in this way. And then like my joke thing is that being a polyglot is cool because I'm working. It's so cool.
Yeah.
I am working to learn my fifth language. I think language is fun. I think words are amazing. They're all made up. They only mean something because we all agree that they mean something. And I loved the discourse that Zero brought about like, it's not just a literal translation. It's context because
and
think about that
right? Yeah.
I think about that when you watch subtitles, particularly if it's a language that you're not familiar with. Like when I watch Squid Games, I just go, I hope that's what it means.
Sure.
I don't speak Korean. And I thought that using that as a complement to a technological advancement to justify why an interpreter would be so important on a crew like Uhura or like Hoshi when a universal translator exists, because obviously we're much further in the future than that TOS era storytelling, I thought was so well handled. And honestly, I want to hear more of the alien languages as well. So that's something that I'm hoping that we get on the show.
I think that, I know you say it's comical, but I actually think that that's one of the more fascinating points because language is what we started off with at the very beginning in Lost and Found with Gwyn and with a female Cation, the young child, right? So again, the writers, and our executive showrunners, the Hageman brothers, they're putting in these details as breadcrumbs to lead us through the specific story so that we can look forward and backward at the same time.
But also, when are we going back for the little kitty baby?
I know.
I'm so distressed about it.
It's going to happen. And it's going to happen when we least expect it, because I think that we were promised tears from their interview, like later on down towards the end of this 5-episode chunk before we get to the next break. But yeah, there was that wonderful scene where Gwyn was surrounded by this scroll of languages, and languages is, she said something about understanding language is kind of like understanding the universe. Without it, you can't communicate outwardly. That's her gift. And since she's a clone of the diviner and not technically a child per se, he must know languages as well. Because it's in his DNA. But, languages and these kind of skill sets and what Dal's learning, talent can only take you so far. Gwyn and Dal, I always thought that they're on these kind of like similar paths. Gwyn's talented in languages, as you said, but understanding and the meaning of language and the interpretation of the language and kind of like acting out the intent of the language, that's something that you're going to grow into. That's something that she's learning. Dal's like that with like leadership. He is literally like the youngest version of James T. Kirk that we've seen so far.
Yes, he's
right?
so Kirky, right?
JT Kirk. Who is this guy? What do we need him for? Right? But it's like not just the Kirk that we knew from the quote unquote Prime universe, but he's more of kind of like a distillated version of Chris Pine's Kirk from the J.J. Abrams universe. Because he's basically just walking, talking cockiness. But we get to see him grow. We get to see him learn. And who better to teach a young Kirk how to grow and learn than Spock, right? So you're seeing that he's naturally gifted at the quick talk, the witty banter. And so was Kirk, right? So are a lot of other like younger, brash type of captains. But that only takes you so far, right? Until your crew is like, yeah, we've heard you double talk us before. Right. We need something a little bit better. And that's where I think this whole Kobayashi thing came into play. Teamwork makes the dream work, right? Teamwork makes the dream work. So that, I think, when you saw the title Kobayashi, and being a veteran fan that you are, just like myself, you know that somewhere along the line, someone's going to learn a lesson about leadership and sacrifice. Is that fair to say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think definitely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that's where I see kind of like the meanings and morals and messages kind of wrote themselves, because that's the nature of the Kobayashi Maru. But the last thing I wanted to talk about also, I really liked you touched on earlier, is the aspect of where do we truly belong? Because you've said before in earlier episodes about this found family that we have, and the way that Gwen and Zero forged this relationship. Now, that's something that I haven't seen before. It was nice that Zero was able to like pull something out of Gwen that Gwen didn't even want to admit from herself. I don't know if that's a little bit of the Medusian influencing Gwen, but it's nice that she said, look, I was taken away from my people by your father, but I had to make do because there are no other Medusians here in this quadrant. So these are now my people. You are now my people. So what do I do with it?
I also thought it was, I apologize. I also thought it was incredibly mature of Zero when they were telling that story and Gwen was trying to onboard the guilt of her father having done that, where Zero was very much like, I don't hold this against you.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but like, this is the reality of my situation. And that is like a level of emotional intelligence that I think even the more seasoned viewers could onboard. I think you comparing Zero to a counselor, almost like a Deanna Troi type, is very, very apt. And I actually think that we're going to get a lot of really, really important, like deep ethical morals and messages from Zero going forward, because right now Zero has kind of been set dressing and now we're starting to see them get some character development, which is really cool.
But also, we haven't really seen kind of like the extent of Zero's abilities, because Zero always says that,
oh, not even close.
You know, I don't know, I can't read your mind, or things of that nature. So once Zero overcomes that, yeah, there's like a little bit, right? It's almost kind of like Deanna Troi being half Beta Z. You can only feel half the feelings, I guess, instead of a full Beta Z feeling all the feelings.
It depends on the episode. There are definitely episodes where she could feel the whole planet. And sometimes she's like, I don't know, I got nothing, man.
Well, once Zero says,
but yeah, I think
once Zero gives us the line joy and gratitude, I'll be done. I'll be dead. So I'm just saying.
Oh my gosh. I was going to say, I think you nailed it though, comparing to being like half Beta Z, because I don't think Zero's going to suddenly appear with all of the diviners' plans inside their head to unveil to everybody to wrap the season up in a nice bow. But I do think that they're going to have some sort of breakthrough, probably through some sort of psychic battle, where they're going to come away with a very important piece of information. And I think it would be cool if it was honestly something to do with Chakotay that they helped break through. I think that'd be very fun.
For me, I think I would like to see if the actual Protostar engine, the power source of the ship itself, is sentient.
The baby
Protostar.
The baby.
Right?
Yeah. I want them to be them friends.
I mean, it's not like Murph exploded in basically a ball of light after eating things with an energy discharge. I'm just saying.
Oh, I love Murph. Murph is just so perfect. Like,
small
we don't
theory
deserve
crafting there.
Murph. That would be so cool. And then Murph becomes the ship.
Exactly. The Murph eats around the ship and becomes kind of like sentient with the ship itself.
It's like the space slug from
a second
TNG.
Skin, or the slug that's like sucking on the Cerritos' nacelle at the very beginning of that episode. I'm going to try to pull us back here to try and wrap up the show. So we always have about a little bit of time just to talk about like one last specific moral meaning or message, or one big takeaway from the show. I always loved in this episode, Ashley, when Spock said, excuse me, he said to Dal, in your own way, you are just as stubborn as another captain of the Enterprise I once knew. I absolutely love this moment. I was in tears in this moment because he was talking to Kirk via Dal, or Dal via Kirk, however you want to see it. Kirk, like I said before, he learned his wisdom and his temperament from Spock. Spock was Kirk's mentor in 2 universes, right? And hearing the words, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. These are the words of the way that Spock basically helped Captain Kirk become the captain who he is. That's how he's helping Dal and how he reached Dal to become the potential captain that he can be. And I always thought that was interesting that this is the performance that I think really, as a soundbite, stood out the most to me, because this was Leonard Nimoy from his performance in The Wrath of Khan. And just think about it from the time span from when Wrath of Khan came out in 1982, and then thinking about this new generation of fans is hearing Leonard Nimoy's voice as Spock. How many years later? 40-ish later? I don't know. Do the math.
Yeah.
But that, yeah, like younger fans are listening to this from the same person who's talking to Dal now. I think that is something that is profound. And I haven't seen that, like I haven't felt this way in a long time about a single scene in a Star Trek episode, at least emotionally like this. So how about you, Ashley? Do you have any final thoughts?
It's also Nimoy at the height of his powers. Like that was like most famous, most gravitas in performance. So you kids are so lucky that's it. If it's your first exposure to Leonard Nimoy, it's a really good one.
You kids, and you're, not Leonard Nimoy, but now you have to.
The thing that always stands out about every Prodigy episode to me is the celebration of unfettered curiosity. And we get a lot of that here. We get that in the way that Jenkum and Dal just literally die. Like you couldn't have worse prepared characters to take on the Kobayashi Maru because they literally know nothing. So there was no way. I mean, nobody has a shot, right? That's the gig, but there was no way they ever had a shot. You have Zero presenting a lot about themselves and being brave enough to be curious about Gwyn, who, of all the characters, maybe I would understand why Zero would have the most reservations about interacting with Gwyn. And then if you wanted to still it down even more, Murph's exploration of the protostar and Murph's like unfearful eating of all things is all telling us that it's okay to be curious and you should be curious, and that's going to make you a better person. And I think that is something, like, if I really want to be an old person, let me adjust my glasses. It's something I don't think that we celebrate enough, is that it's important to be curious. And in a show that is all about boldly going, and we're in a new quadrant and we're tackling the new frontier, I think that is a really, really important lesson. And it's really elegant to see it play out in 3 very distinctly different ways over the course of this episode.
Perfect. Well said.
Okay, the time has come, the space slug said. We've reached the end of our show.
Oh, sad faces. Everybody.
I know,
sad faces.
Saddest of faces. So thank you to everyone for joining us here on Mission Log Prodigy. If you enjoyed our show, please make sure that you like and share and subscribe to our Mission Log Prodigy playlist on the Roddenberry Entertainment YouTube channel to see all of these beautiful faces. And, or why not both? Find us on your podcatcher of choice. Mission Log Prodigy is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment executive producer Rod Roddenberry. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is missionlogpodcast.com. And if you would like to support Mission Log directly, and I know you do, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog.
Now, as you can tell, like Ashley and I were both really excited to be back. I've missed her tremendously, and I'm glad that we have another chance to do another 4 episodes after this before the next break. And then we're going to be on for the next 10 after that. So buckle in, because we have so much great Prodigy to cover. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to be with us. We look forward to covering all future episodes of Star Trek Prodigy for you for the remainder of this before we go to the break. And now it's time for our very special incoming transmissions, of which we have missed tremendously. Enjoy.
Receiving listener communications. Message playback begins.
What's your name?
Sarah,
How old are you?
6.
Okay. Did you like the episode?
Yes.
All right. What was your favorite part?
Where he finally won, then he blew up the other ship.
Oops. And then what do you think it was trying to teach us, the episode?
That we should use our ears more than our mouth.
All right. Very good. Thanks, Sarah. Can you say bye?
Bye. Hi, my name's James.
And how old are you?
a 6, and I also love the episode
Okay. And what was your favorite part?
when he accidentally blew up the Enterprise.
Okay. And did you learn anything?
I learned that the Many's needs should be taken before the fuse.
Yes. Who taught him that?
Spock.
Yeah. That was pretty cool seeing the old characters.
Yeah.
Who was your favorite to see?
Yeah, Dr. Crusher.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.